It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of February 15th, 2002. We have 5 films to look at today, so a lot to get to. Let's just go ahead and jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, Denzel Washington in the action thriller, John Q. Washington plays the title character, who's a man who's forced to take a hospital emergency room hostage in order to help his son receive a heart transplant. You see in the trailer there, Robert Duvall, James Woods, Anne Hesh, Kimberly Elise, and Ray Liotta are among the cast in this particular film. And like I've talked about this before about Denzel Washington. I think he's the greatest actor we have right now. He can usually elevate movies like this that are not that great in particular and put it to another level. And while he's the best thing about this movie, as much as he's trying, it still can't save this movie from really being being a film that makes the health system look really, really bad. And I mean, you can question the health system if you want to of our country. I mean, there is a lot to question about it. Don't get me wrong, but this movie really feels like a film that was like it's trying to give you it's trying to pound a message right into you. Like it's not trying to give you, like, it's doing it in a way where it feels very manipulative. It feels very much like a film that doesn't really know what it's trying to accomplish by doing something like this. And it probably would help if they didn't get a man who has not written anything in particular since the late 80s, early 90s, because if you look up this guy's bibliography on Wikipedia, he's mostly known for writing episodes of shows like Mr. Belvedere, Jake and the Fat Man, Highway to Heaven, and Dynasty. That's 10 years ago since Jake and the Fat Man ended, and that was the later show that ended there. So you would think after all that this guy would be better at it, but this film probably is not a good way to show that. But then again, this probably could have been a script that was tossed around for a number of different years, and we just finally got to Denzel Washington. He saw that opportunity and said, "I'll take it." I mean, my name's going to be on this movie, so why not? I mean, and like I said, he's the best thing about the movie in particular. But we've seen movies that have done this concept much better. Of course, one of the big ones is Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon. George Clooney made a really great, underrated one with Jodie Foster directing it, Money Monster, which also had Julia Roberts in it, too. That was a great movie that came out about 10 years ago. Criminally underrated film. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check that one out. As much as Denzel Washington is trying his best to save this material, he really is the best thing about the movie, but the film feels way too manipulative with the message that it's trying to get across, trying to criticize and satirize the health system as a whole, but it just doesn't really fly all that well. And as much as John Cassavetes can be a really good director, and as much as Denzel Washington is doing his best to try to save it, it's not enough to save the movie in the end. And luckily this film didn't kill his Oscar chances either, because usually a film like this would kill somebody's chances of winning an Oscar. I mean, just ask Eddie Murphy and Hugh Jackman how that went when they made bad movies before the Academy Awards. But I mean, the movie just isn't that good. It's a movie that I think had a point that I wanted to get across, but it needed a better scriptwriter to really get the point down without feeling too manipulative and punching it right in your gut and your face, pretty much. But yeah, not much more to say about that one. Not one of Denzel's better movies, despite him doing the best he can with it. It's just not worth it in the end. So that is John Q. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, and that is Britney Spears making her feature film debut as an actress, Crossroads. So set in Georgia, Britney Spears is one of 3 teenage girls who go on a cross-country road trip as they find themselves and their friendship in the process. The other 2 girls are names you're very familiar with. Zoe Saldana from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, Avatar, Star Trek, you name it. Karen Manning from Orange is the New Black. You also have Kim Cattrall, Dan Aykroyd, Anson Mount in this as well. And the writer of this is actually Shonda Rhimes, who, of course, wanted to create Grey's Anatomy. This was actually also based off of a story by Britney Spears. And the director of this is Tamara Davis, who did Half-Baked. And Half-Baked, she also did Billy Madison, CB4. So not a bad director per se. And to Britney Spears' credit, she probably made a better movie than Glitter, which was not a good movie. Even though Mariah Carey was not the worst thing about that movie, it was just a lot of different things going against the film in particular. This is bad on a number of different levels, and none of them includes Britney Spears, because she is doing a decent acting job in here. And she, if she had gotten better scripts to work with, I think she could have made it as a pretty solid actress overall. But the movie itself is just really bland and kind of like with John Q, very manipulative and very mediocre. But even in this, but I think this one is a little bit more offensive because of things that they do here that make little to no sense whatsoever. Like there's a subplot about teenage pregnancy and the way it's presented. It's just like, ugh, like that feels really uncomfortable on how you're doing this. But then again, it's Shonda Rhimes who basically has made that part of her living because she's behind some of the most popular shows of the last 10 years. But I mean, I guess of all the movies I've looked at with actresses who are singers, you know, Mandy Moore and Walk to Remember, we looked at a couple weeks ago, Mariah Carey and Glitter, I guess Britney Spears' performance in this is the best of the three, and it's the most tolerable of the three movies, but some of the decisions they make in this movie really make you think, like, what the hell are you thinking? I mean, like, if you had a better script, maybe you could make this work, but I don't know. To me, personally, this is one of those movies where, you know, as much as I like Britney Spears in this, I can't really say it's a good movie in general. But if you're looking for, like, the best of the three films I just mentioned, Walk to Remember, Glitter, and this is probably the best one, but even then, it's not that memorable of a movie. And, you know, when the movie was actually re-released in the theaters not too long ago, and I'm thinking, why? Like, why put that out in theaters again? Like, this movie wasn't really that popular enough to warrant a re-release on the big screen. And supposedly they did it because Britney Spears' memoir had just come out recently. But other than that, though, I couldn't see any other reason why they would release that movie in theaters again. But, I mean, I guess, like I said, it's not the worst movie you could see with a pop singer in the leading role in it, but it's not great either. It's a movie that just feels like this one's at least trying, but maybe they tried a little bit too hard compared to some of the other movies I've talked about. But yeah, not much more to say about this one. Crossroads, I don't know. It's not one I can't really say it's bad. I can't really say it's good either. But I digress. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, which is a Peter Pan sequel coming nearly almost 50 years after the original Peter Pan. That is Disney's Return to Neverland. As I had mentioned, Return to Neverland is the sequel to the 1953 Disney adaptation of Peter Pan. And the story here is that you follow a girl who refuses to believe in her mother's story during the Blitz in London, the mother being the older version of Wendy, and she's only to be mistakenly brought to Neverland by the pirates, including Captain Hook. And in order for her to get home, she needs Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, and the Lost Boys to encourage her to fly and make her believe. And the most interesting thing about this movie in particular is that it got a theatrical release. And rather than going direct to video like most Disney sequels, apparently what was happening was that Disney Movie Tunes, the company that was putting these out, developed then and signed the work for Peter and Jane to Disney Animation Canada, and the film was actually supposed to be a Peter Pan sequel destined for a theatrical release. However, not too long after that, the Canadian unit stopped working on the movie, and then basically it was supposed to be then a video release, but then it eventually became a theatrical release once again. I mean, it went through these different... Basically, instead of being the film that was supposed to be a theatrical release that went straight to video, it's the complete opposite, where you move it back from a straight-to-video release to a theatrical release midway through the production, much like some of the other Disney sequels, like most notably The Jungle Book 2, which comes out years later, and also Planes, which went through the same thing. It was supposed to be a direct-to-video release, but then eventually got the push back into theaters, and I never really thought this needed to be a theatrical release, but then again, I'm not involved in Disney's business or marketing strategies. I'm just here to talk about the movie itself. And the movie itself, most people are very mixed about it, but it has more going for it than I think a lot of people would give it credit for. I do like the interesting hook to the idea, no pun intended, that the main character, she has to deal with the fact that she's living in a country being torn apart by World War II, and you understand why she acts the way she does. She can't really believe in magic or fairy tales when you're in the middle of a war-torn country where thousands of people are getting killed or severely injured almost every single day. And there's even a point where Hook tries to manipulate Wendy's daughter Jane using the war as his motivation, showing that Hook could actually be clever in trying to seduce others to his side. And the animation does look very, very good. There's a really cool opening sequence where Hook is kidnapping Jane and the ship is flying through London while the war is going on. It still looks pretty impressive even to this very day. They actually had some good replacements for the voice actors, too. Blaine Weaver does a pretty good job as Peter Pan, and Corey Burton does a very good job as Captain Hook. You know, they do a good job of recapturing the spirit of the original voices in those particular performances. And it's pretty solid recreations of those characters in particular. And those are some of the positives. I will say another positive, too. I didn't know that this was actually directed by Donovan Cook, who, that name may not sound familiar to a lot of people, but if you grew up with a show called Two Stupid Dogs back in the 1990s, you know that he's one of the creators of that show, and he directed a couple of movies for Disney around this time. This one that went to theaters, and then the Three Musketeers movie that came out with Mickey Mouse and the gang about a couple years later, which, I mean, now that I know that it's his work, and I've seen Two Stupid Dogs and a lot of his work from Disney, I can definitely tell that it's his work in particular. But as far as the negatives go, it's a pretty generic storyline. Essentially, the plot of the film is Hook, but with a few changes swapped around in terms of where it takes place in the World War II elements. The songs are also kind of generic and out of place, too, for the time period. I mean, B.B. Mac and They Might Be Giants singing the pop songs of the early 2000s, and the film is supposed to take place in the 1940s. I mean, yeah, there's a reason why you should stick to the time periods in particular. I mean, Pan tried to do that with that terrible Hugh Jackman movie with Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, and look how well that turned out. But, I guess one other positive I could bring up with this movie is that I do like the thing that happens at the end when, you know, the young Peter Pan meets the older Wendy and she actually remembers him and Peter Pan's looking at her, and, like, it's a nice little scene, and it actually helps. It helps a little bit to give this movie a little bit more light to it than I think a lot of people would have looked at it, but other than moments like that, it's not a memorable movie in particular like the original Peter Pan, but it does have those moments I talked about where it is worth it when it's all said and done. I think the animation is okay. I think the voice acting is pretty good. Some of the twists and turns they do here are pretty cool. Some of the ideas they actually do are pretty interesting, so I can't really say it's a loss in particular or a pointless film in general, because there are some cool ideas that they actually do work with here. But I just wish that the film had done more to maybe kind of make it seem more theatrical than what it actually is, and to actually do something a little bit different in terms of the storyline and pretty much the music in general. But other than that, though, I think it's a fun little film. I think if you watch it once, you probably get some enjoyment out of it. I don't think you'd watch it as many times as you would say you would with the original Peter Pan, which still holds up on a number of different levels, and obviously is the better movie. But this, I don't know. I think it's a lot better than people would give it credit for. Definitely check it out. I think it's definitely worth it, but just don't expect it to be something on the same level as the original Peter Pan. So with that said, that's Return to Neverland. Now let's go ahead and get back to some crappy movies. Bruce Willis' new movie, Heart's War. Bruce Willis plays a fourth-generation Army colonel who's imprisoned in a brutal German POW camp. Still, as the senior-ranking American officer, he commands his fellow inmates, keeping a sense of honor alive in a place where honor is easy to destroy, all under the dangerous eye of the Luftwaffe veteran Colonel Wilhelm Visser. Never giving up the fight to win the war, McNamara is silently planning, waiting for his moment to strike back at the enemy, and a murder at the camp gives him a chance to set a risky plan in motion. With a court-martial to keep Visser and the Germans distracted, McNamara organizes a cunning scheme to escape and destroy a nearby munitions plant, enlisting the unwitting help of a young lieutenant played by Colin Farrell. Together with his men, McNamara uses a hero's resolve to carry out his mission, ultimately forcing the weight of the value of his life against the good of the country. And, I don't know. This is one of those movies where there was some promise to it overall. It's got a good director who did Primal Fear. He also did Frequency. But then again, he also did Fallen, which was one of Denzel Washington's worst movies in particular. Billy Ray is a writer here that's very familiar with his work. If you've seen stuff like Shattered Glass, Breach, Overlord. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff here. The Hunger Games, Captain Phillips. So he has some decent films overall. I was bored by this movie, man. Like, I love Bruce Willis, and I like seeing him in movies where he's playing a different role than what we're used to seeing, but man, it's just not worth it, man. There's too many subplots going on, too many characters that really feel unnecessary in general, and for a movie that's just a little over 2 hours long, it feels like you're sitting there for a long, long period of time, and you don't really get invested in these characters whatsoever. As much as you admire the talents of the people involved. I mean, Colin Farrell, Terrence Howard, Linus Roach, Maury Sterling, Adrian Grenier is in this as well. Rory Corcoran, Sam Worthington, Jonathan Brandis is in this movie as well. Like, there's a lot of promise here with the people involved in here, but the story is just so bland and mediocre, and there's nothing really about it that makes you get excited when it's all said and done. Especially since Black Hawk Down had just come out beforehand, which I thought was a far superior war film around this time period. This movie just came around and just feels like a drag throughout most of it. And as much as it's trying its best, you just can't get really invested into it. It's a boring movie with a story that's not really all that engaging, all that interesting, and it just feels forced. It feels like a movie that's just really forcing it down your throat, and it runs on way too long. It drags. There's never really a point where you get invested or excited in what's going on. It's just like you're waiting for it to just end already. Kind of like the reviews I do here, but I digress. Hearts War, yeah, it's, as much as it's trying, it's just not worth it in the end. It's a boring movie, a dull drag of a film. It's just not worth it in the end, so that's Hearts War. So let's end the show on a positive note here. Let's talk about Broken Lizard's comedy classic, Super Troopers. First, let me say that scene in particular plays out much funnier in the movie. You think it's going to be just that one little scene right there, but no, it adds on if you're watching it in the movie, and it's much better in the movie itself. I mean, that's one of those scenes where you think you've seen the best clip moments from that particular scene, but no, you got to see the movie to see how that plays out. But the story of this movie, I don't really think I need to say this about that, because you have 5 straight troopers from Vermont out to have a good time. Stationed in a remote area near the Canadian border, the troopers, avid pranksters with an affinity for syrup, have a knack for screwing up on the job. But when budget cuts in the town of Spurbury threaten the livelihood and pit them against the arch-rival Spurbury PD, the 5 friends try to straighten up and fly right. That is until a dead body is discovered and a possible drug ring is unearthed. The Super Troopers spring into action, attempting to solve the crime, save their jobs, and outdo the local police department. This came before Reno 911, and I think a lot of the inspiration for Reno 911 came from this movie, because you could definitely feel a lot of the inspiration from this movie in that show. And this is a movie that opened the door to Broken Lizard to a lot of people, myself included. And these guys are funny. I mean, Jay Chandrasekhar, Kevin Heffernan, Steve Leamy, Paul Sotir, Eric Stolhansk. I mean, these guys are really, really funny. They have a lot of funny moments in this movie. And this film is just absolutely hilarious. It's a stupid comedy, but it's this best kind of a stupid comedy layer, where a lot of the memorable moments in here are great. That scene I was just talking about, the scene where the guys are asked by the cops to pull over, just like, he's already pulled over, he can't pull over anymore. And like, scenes like that really are what carry the movie overall to this other level. It's a really, really funny movie. Absolutely brilliant. A phenomenal cast in particular. That also includes Brian Cox and Marisa Coughlan. I mean, it's a hilarious movie, man. I don't think I need to say any more about this particular movie that hasn't already been said already, because this thing did go on to have a massive cult following, and even led to a sequel that came out in 2018, which is not quite as good as the original film, but it's still fun. I still found a lot of fun in that particular movie. But this... yeah, man, this is a really funny movie. This is one that still holds up. It's really funny, really stupid fun. It's fun, man. It's just classic comedy. The classic kind of screwball comedy that works for a movie like this. It just works for this time. It's a brilliant movie, man. It's a really, really funny movie. I love it. It never gets unfunny every time I see it. It's really brilliant stuff. I really love it. Super Troopers, what more do I gotta say? And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. When we meet next time, we'll take a look at 2 movies, including the last film starring Aaliyah, Queen of the Damned, and we also have Tom Shadyak's film Dragonfly with Kevin Costner. We'll take a look at both of those movies the next time we meet. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.